Good morning. I got instruction before I came up here that I talked too loud, and so I have to adjust some of the microphones. The Psalm 47, we're not actually going to be reading from it today, but instead I wanted that to be read because it's what's called an enthronement psalm. It's this idea of God being king of all the nations. And that's going to be, it's kind of to get your mind thinking, to get us going in the direction where we're going to be going today. But before that, it's going to be a lot of stuff up here. Pretty soon we'll probably have to it'll be like a wall. And so I hope you're participating in the Brown Bag Christmas. Like they said, I think that's a great ministry, and I hope we continue to do that. And so if you have any requests or any people that you want to turn in, you can do that. Turn that into the office, and I hope you'll get involved with that. Isn't it great when things work out the way we want them to? I mean, you have a set plan. You're like, all right, this is going to happen, then this is going to happen. And when that all works out, you just feel good. You're like, oh man, life is perfect. It's kind of like when you're putting a puzzle together, and you put that piece that you've been looking for 3 days for that piece. And a piece, like a puzzle of 1,000 pieces, and you finally find it, and it just goes in perfect, and you're like, it's going great. My dad, growing up, he had this phrase, and he said it all the time, and he said it, and so then naturally I've started saying it, and we've kind of called it the Coghill mantra, and Jessica's given me a shake of the head because she knows I say it all the time, and it's this phrase, it'll all work out. You just say that phrase and it's like, it'll all work out. And we like it when things work out. We don't like hiccups. We don't like problems in our life. We don't like bumps in the road. And so normally when things are going well, we try to keep them going well. We try to keep things going with that natural flow or rhythm. We don't like things to mess up. And so this idea of everything working out perfectly or no bumps in the road is exactly what we find with Israel in 1 Samuel chapter 7. And this is going to be pretty much where we are for much of the morning, 1 Samuel chapter 7 and chapter 8. And so you can be going there in your Bibles if you like. So we've got the nation of Israel, God's chosen people, and they have this judge named Samuel. And Israel has been worshiping other gods. They've been worshiping foreign gods, and this is not pleasing to God with a capital G. And so the Philistines have captured Israel. And the Israelites recognize that they've done a very bad thing. And so they begin to turn back towards God. And Samuel tells them in verse 3 of 1 Samuel chapter 7 that if they are returning to God, then they need to get rid of those foreign gods. He tells them to remove the foreign gods from their presence. And so let's pick up 1 Samuel chapter 7, verse 3. And Samuel said to the whole house of Israel, if you are returning to the Lord with all your hearts, then rid yourselves of the foreign gods and the Ashtaroths, and commit yourselves to the Lord and serve him only. And he will deliver you out of the hand of the Philistines. So the Israelites put away their Baals and Ashtaroths and served the Lord only. Then Samuel said, assemble all Israel at Mizpah, and I will intercede with the Lord for you. When they had assembled at Mizpah, they drew water and poured it out before the Lord. On that day they fasted, and there they confessed, we have sinned against the Lord. And Samuel was leader of Israel at Mizpah. When the Philistines heard that Israel had assembled at Mizpah, the rulers of the Philistines came up to attack them. And when the Israelites heard of it, they were afraid because of the Philistines. They said to Samuel, do not stop crying out to the Lord our God for us, that he may rescue us from the hand of the Philistines. Then Samuel took a suckling lamb and offered it up as a whole burnt offering to the Lord. He cried out to the Lord on Israel's behalf, and the Lord answered him. While Samuel was sacrificing the burnt offering, the Philistines drew near to engage Israel in battle. But that day the Lord thundered with loud thunder against the Philistines and threw them into such a panic that they were routed before the Israelites. And so Israel had messed up. Things weren't going well, but then they turned back towards God. They removed the foreign gods. They remove the sin from their life. They confess their sin, and God is pleased with them again. In verse 10, we see that that day the Lord thundered with loud thunder against the Philistines, threw them into such a panic that they were routed before the Philistines. Before the Israelites. And then jump ahead a few verses to halfway through verse 13. It says, throughout Samuel's lifetime, the hand of the Lord was against the Philistines. The towns from Ekron to Gath that the Philistines had captured from Israel were restored to Israel. And Israel delivered the neighboring territory from the power of the Philistines, and there was peace between Israel and the Amorites. From that moment on, it says God's hand was against the Philistines, and there was peace between Israel and the Amorites. Israel is back in God's good graces. And like we were talking about earlier, everything is going well. There's no bumps in the road. Everything is at peace. You read that and you think, oh, great. Israel, don't mess this up now. You think as long as they don't mess this up, things are looking pretty good. And so, again, we talked about we don't like bumps in the road. But we know the story. We know it doesn't stay that way for long. 1 Samuel chapter 8, verses 1 through 7. When Samuel grew old, he appointed his sons as judges for Israel. The name of his firstborn was Joel, and the name of his second was Abijah, and they served at Beersheba. But his sons did not walk in his ways. They turned aside after dishonest gain and accepted bribes and perverted justice. So all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah. They said to him, you are old, and your sons do not walk in your ways. Now appoint a king to lead us, such as all the other nations have. But when they said, give us a king to lead us, this displeased Samuel, so he prayed to the Lord. And the Lord told him, listen to all that the people are saying to you. It is not you they have rejected, but they have rejected me as their king. You ever have one of those moments where you say something and you wish you could take it back? You're saying something, and as the words are coming out of your mouth almost, you just start thinking in your head, oh, wow, what I'm saying is really stupid. I shouldn't be saying this. And you almost want to grab those words back up before they reach the ears of the person you're talking to. I read this, and it kind of makes me wonder, is that happening with the Israelites? Are they saying things like this? Are they asking Samuel for a king? And is anyone in the crowd, you almost kind of wonder, is anyone thinking, is anyone in Israel thinking, I shouldn't be saying this, or this probably isn't a good idea? Are they having second thoughts? Or, did I just say that out loud to Samuel? Did I just ask for a king? But that's beside the point, because it doesn't really matter, because the words have been said. They're out there in the open. Samuel has heard them. God has heard them. And, of course, God probably knew it was coming before the words were even spoken. But the key thing here is that right here marks a turning point for Israel. There was peace for Israel. Things were going well before chapter 8. But then they asked for a king, and problems are now going to come about. And why are problems going to come about? Because of their action. In my Bible, I've got chapter headings or chapter IDs, and they kind of are there to kind of give you an idea of what that section is about, or what kind of a heads up. And sometimes they're great, but sometimes whoever added the chapter headings much later, sometimes I think they could have put them in a different spot, or maybe change the wording. And so on mine, I've actually adjusted the wording for this. Mine says Israel asks for a king, which makes sense. But I've changed it or inserted some words. So it says Israel asks for a new/different king. And the idea being, that's really what's happening in this section. Israel is asking for a new or a different king. Israel already had a king, and that king is God. But they don't want that king anymore. And so they really are asking for a new king. Now, as a side note, it interests me. It's interesting to me that they want a new king, but they go to Samuel. You know how when someone's in authority and you want them out of office, basically, you don't go to them. You kind of go behind their back. It kind of is just kind of funny to me that it kind of seems like that's what they're doing. They're going to Samuel, but that's side point. Anyways, Verse 7, it says, "The Lord told Samuel, 'Listen to all that the people are saying to you. It is not you they have rejected, but they have rejected me as their king.'" This is what I'm talking about changing the chapter ID or chapter heading from Israel asks for a king to Israel asks for a new king. God says they have rejected me as their king. They have a king already, it's God, but they have rejected him. And that word rejected, it's so strong. Most all English translations have used the word rejected. And it's such a strong word because it's so much more than just they didn't like him, or they didn't really jive well with him, but rejected. And when I hear the word rejected, I think of this boy. He sees this girl and he wants to go ask her out on a date or ask her to the dance, and she's kind of the popular pretty girl, and he might not be so popular or pretty. He might be the Mike Coghill of the school, and so he's at home. He's standing in front of the mirror. He's like, "Jessica, will you go out with me?" Or "Jessica, will you go to the dance with me?" And he practices it. He gets the wording just right. And then, on that day, he's like, "Okay, on this day, I'm going to do it." And so he's at his house. He showers for once and gets all cleaned up, picks out his clothes, puts on the cologne. He's got the words picked out. And he goes to school. He's got, the butterflies are in his stomach. He's getting all nervous. He walks up to the girl. And, of course, all her friends are right there, too. And he wasn't really planning on them being there. But he's there, and he's like, "Will you go to the dance with me?" And he doesn't quite get the words out exactly how he wanted, but the words come out, and then she just says, "No." And you're just kind of like, you've seen it in movies, that scene, and you're just like, oh, you feel bad for the guy, you hurt for him, because you know how he must feel, or you have an idea how he must feel, and that rejection, getting rejected, getting turned down. All this time and effort was put towards this girl. All this time and effort was put into establishing this relationship. And then she just turns him down, doesn't even give him a second thought, doesn't even think about it. And that's kind of how it is when you read this story. God is the boy, and then Israel is the girl that rejects him. And you read that and you think, oh man, what is Israel doing? What are they thinking? But it wasn't always like this. Let's go to Joshua chapter 24. Joshua 24, you've got Joshua before the nation of Israel. In verse 14, he says, "Now fear the Lord and serve him with all faithfulness. Throw away the gods your forefathers worshipped beyond the river and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your forefathers served beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you are living. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord." And then jump down to verse 21. "But the people said to Joshua, 'No, we will serve the Lord.'" And so Joshua says, you can choose, but choose now who you are going to serve. And they say, "We are going to serve the Lord." There's this commitment to serve God. The commitment was there. They wanted to serve the Lord, but they made mistakes and things got in their way. They recognized that it was important for God to be their king right here, but we know it didn't stay that way. The problem was Israel was window shopping. And we all know what window shopping is. You're walking down nowadays it's screen shopping, I think. You go to Amazon or something and you see something, or you're walking, by the stores or in the stores and you see something, you think, oh man, if only I had that. If I had that, my life would be perfect. I would have everything I need. If I had those clothes, or if I had that gadget, if I had that device, if I had that tool, whatever it is, we all have had those moments where we see something when we're like, oh man, I just need that. And so Israel is window shopping, basically. You know, they saw other nations had kings, and they thought, oh man, if only we had a physical king, then life would really be great. Then we would be an actual nation. Then we would be made complete. We would be made whole if we had that. But the problem with window shopping is when you get home, or you get impulsive. You think, oh, I have to have that now. And so you get it, and then you get it home, and you put it on, and you're like, oh, you know, it doesn't quite fit right like it did on that mannequin. Or, you know, the device, you know, it's great, but in the commercial they said it would do this, but it really doesn't do that very well. Or I talk to Siri and I tell her to give me directions to McDonald's, and she's giving me directions to Sears or something like that. You know, and it just doesn't work the way we thought. And then we get buyer's remorse. And then all of a sudden that thing that we thought was so great, that thing we thought we had to have, we're like, oh, you know, this really isn't that great. I really don't want this, or I really didn't need this, or, you know, my life really isn't a whole lot better because of this. And so the question is, will Israel get buyer's remorse from this? And we know the answer to that, and we know that them having a physical king for them isn't good. And in fact, it causes them to fall further away from God. And in fact, in 1 Samuel chapter 8, after they've asked for a king, Samuel gets them all together in verses 11 through 18, and he warns the Israelites against having a physical king. He tells them that they're going to regret this decision. He basically tells them that they're going to have buyer's remorse. But look at what the Israelites say to Samuel in verses 19 and 20. So Samuel's giving them the warning, and then Israel says, but the people refused to listen to Samuel. No, they said, we want a king over us. Then we will be like all the other nations, with a king to lead us and to go out before us and fight our battles. They wanted a king to fight their battles. And when you read Joshua, when they're actually taking over the land of Canaan, it was because of God. God fought their battles already. And so it just doesn't line up to us when we read that. But it says in verse 19, they refused to listen to Samuel. You know when a kid hears someone talking and they don't want to listen, you know what do? They stick their fingers in their ears and they do the la 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 la. You know, that's kind of what I imagine the Israelites, you know, Samuel's just warned them about this, and Israel is sitting there like, no, not going to listen. You know, they've put their fingers in their ears. They don't want to listen to Samuel. They don't want to listen to the truth. They only see what they want to see. And that's looking at these other nations and seeing how awesome it is to have a physical king. Their eyes are blinded, and it's covered their ears so they can't see or listen to logic. Now, for us, you know, we read that story and we think, man, Israel is so stupid. You know, you read that and you think, what are they thinking? Why would they ever reject God? Why would they think something physical is more important than the heavenly God? Why would they put their trust in something physical instead of God? And you start thinking that, and then you're like, oh, wait. Eventually, we have to transition to the difficult part, and we have to start thinking of ourselves. You know, Israel wanted a physical king. They wanted someone they could see, someone they could touch, and put their trust in. And then we begin to think about ourselves. Is there something physical out there that I tend to put my trust in? We said Israel got blinded. We said they were looking at other nations and it distorted their vision. You know, it's kind of like a blindfold. You know, they put on the blindfold because they see the other nations, and then they're just kind of walking around, don't really know where they're going. They don't know what direction they're heading. And that blindfold is this idea that they need a physical king. This idea of having a physical king has blinded them to the truth. And many times in our life, we get blinded just like the Israelites. We see other things and we think we need to make that our king. And so maybe our blindfold, the thing that covers our vision or distorts our vision, maybe it's our job. I think as long as I have my job and can provide for my family, then I'll be at peace. Or maybe it's money. As long as I have enough money in my savings account, as long as my 401k looks good, then I'll have peace in my life. Maybe it's a relationship. I'm not validated unless I have a boyfriend or girlfriend in my life. When I have that boyfriend or girlfriend or relationship, that shows me that I'm important. That shows me that I'm worth something. That shows me that I have value. Maybe it's clothes, cars, or other physical things that blind us. We think if we have the status, then everything will be okay. Everything will look all right. Maybe it's even just government or country leaders or anything like that. If I put my trust in our country's leaders, then I'll have security. Then I'll be safe. We put our trust in all these things and they blind us just like the Israelites were blinded. Now all those things, relationships, job, money, those are good things, but we can't let them control our lives. Because there is only one king of our life, and that is God. There's a song in our songbooks. If you want to turn there, it's 144. We're actually going to sing this together because it's a worship the King. And it matches along with this idea of God being our King. So as we sing this, I want you to keep in mind this idea of God being our King. And so 144, we'll sing just all three verses. Oh, worship the King, all glorious above, and gratefully sing His wonderful love. Our shield and defender, the Ancient of Days, pavilioned in splendor and girded with praise. Thy bountiful care, what tongue can recite? It breathes in the air, it shines in the light, it streams from the hills, it descends to the plain, and sweetly distills in the dew and the rain. Frail children of dust and feeble as frail, in Thee do we trust, nor find Thee too frail. Thy mercies how tender, how firm to the end, our Maker, Defender, Redeemer, and friend. Sorry about that. Oh man, this is going to be bad. In this song, it says, God is our shield and defender. It says He gives bountiful care. It says, in Him we trust, and He is our Maker. He is our defender, He is our Redeemer, and He is our friend. And above all, He is our King. So who is our King? Who do we put our trust in God? Have you put your trust in God? Have you committed your life to God? This is, man. Oh, I'm good. Okay. Just set it right there. Practiced this all this week and it went fine. I blame you all because you weren't here. So who is our King? Have we put our trust in God? Have we committed our life to Him? Here in a moment, Bob's going to lead us in a song. And if you would like to commit your life to God, if there's anything we can do, if you need to rededicate your life to God, if we can pray for you in any way, please come now as we stand and sing.